The Vikings, perhaps one of history's most recognizable and intimidating warriors to ever roam the face of the earth. Everything from their menacing physical appearance to their beautifully crafted longships, and of course, their incredibly complex but equally entertaining mythology, have all become ingrained in today's pop culture. So much so that the Vikings themselves have become somewhat iconic. It seems that in today's entertainment-obsessed society, that the Vikings, but more broadly speaking, the Scandinavian culture as a whole, have essentially become the go-to archetype for almost anything popular culture related, which of course includes anything from historical retellings to pure fiction. Like it or not, though, in terms of popular culture, the Vikings are here to stay, it seems. At least for the time being, anyways. However, this Viking invasion of popular culture is rather interesting to study, as not only does it help us to understand the Scandinavian culture more clearly, but it also speaks volumes about our own culture in regards to what type of heroes we like to see depicted on screen. The idea surrounding heroism has been a concept that has long existed throughout human history. From the early days of Greek heroes such as Odysseus to the modern era of Batman, heroes have always been at the forefront of popular culture, and odds are, always will. During the Viking Age, which ranged from 780 to 1070 CE, the very idea surrounding heroism was very important, as that was essentially what the entire Scandinavian culture was built upon. So while popular culture may portray the Vikings as bloodthirsty killing machines, in reality, they were far more complex than that and lived by a strict code of honor. While many Scandinavians strive to achieve greatness through battle and be granted a noble death, no one ever came close to that of their gods, who were highly respected in the Viking world. At the center of all this greatness was Odin, who was the chief god, but it was actually Odin's son, Thor, who was the favorite of the Scandinavians. Thor was the strongest and bravest of all the Norse gods, and as a result of that, he was a prime example of what a good warrior and an ideal man should strive to be like in this culture. So much so that the people tended to favor Thor over Odin in their prayers. So while we may primarily know the God of Thunder today as a Marvel superhero, he was basically a superhero long before that, which in turn was reflected in the Vikings' whole idea of what a heroic society should strive to be like. Thor was their god, but he was also their idol. Now skip ahead a millennium to the year 1962. American comic book writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby struck lightning in a bottle, pun intended, when they revamped the popular Norse god as a superhero, but for a new age. But unlike the previous depiction of Thor, this version of the character fought alongside the Earth's mightiest heroes on a team known as the Avengers, and was constantly at odds with his villainous brother, Loki. Yet when we look at Thor from the Marvel Universe and compare him to the Norse mythology version of the character, does this popularized depiction of the classic god actually damage Norse mythology? Or, on an ironic level, has this revamped telling of the character actually strengthened it? The answer to that is coming up. Of course, many scholars were quick to point out the many problems that the Marvel depiction of Thor presented when he first appeared in comic books in 1962. Most notably, that Marvel romanticized and took far too many creative liberties with the character, and consequently bastardized the entire Norse mythology in doing so. Yet, despite these radical changes in character and origin, Thor went on to become one of the most popular superheroes on the planet, so much that this fictional superhero persona largely began to overshadow the original depiction to the point where one could no longer get away with talking about the Norse god anymore without acknowledging his superhero side first. In today's video, we'll take a look at the god of thunder himself, both the Norse mythology version of the character as well as his Marvel counterpart, and debate whether or not the popularized version of the character stays true to the original or not. Then discuss how Thor has played a part in masculinity throughout the years. And hopefully, when all is said and done, by the end of the video, we'll be able to establish if Marvel really did bastardize Norse mythology or not. So without further ado, let's talk Thor and all things Norse mythology. The basis of a hero. Thor as both a modern and classic hero. We live in an interesting time in history. As recently in popular culture, the very idea of what makes a Viking is often being disputed among academic circles. A noticeable trait we're seeing in today's pop culture is that a certain hero may possess Viking like attributes, but in the end is not actually a Viking, which in turn leaves us with a pseudo Viking, who may look and act like a Viking, but at their core is not a Viking. The Marvel depiction of Thor is very much a prime example of what exactly a pseudo Viking is, as he basically is the same character as his Norse god counterpart, but at the same time, he is also an entirely different character. Everything that worked with the original character has been carried over, but along the way, numerous character traits and plot points have been abandoned in favor of new ones. So, at its core, the Marvel version of Thor is really a reboot. However, love or hate this depiction of the Norse god turned superhero, one thing that can be said for Marvel's take on Thor, as well as his in universe brother Loki, is that they ultimately put the Vikings on the map for many, especially younger people. So, with Thor being derived from Norse mythology and currently being one of the biggest superheroes on the planet right now, that character and the history associated with him ultimately serve as a metaphorical bridge for people to pursue history pertaining to the original character. Sure, what we're seeing Thor, Loki, and the rest of the Asgardians do in the Marvel Universe is technically history being communicated through the means of popular culture, but it is bad history. Yet, ironically, this is the type of bad history that gets people interested in the field. We watch movies and read comic books to escape from our own reality, and in doing so, should not expect anything in those films or books to line up with what our own reality is like, because in the end, that wouldn't make for a good story. When we look at Thor as a modern hero, and then compare him to the Viking Age hero, the two versions do largely coincide with each other in many ways, as their basic character structure is still very much present. More often than not, whenever Asgard or Earth is being threatened from villainous adversaries, such as Loki, Hela, or even Thanos, Thor usually rises to the challenge and uses his brute strength to stop the villains, because at his core, he is a hero. But he is also a blunt instrument of war and destruction, just as he was in the Norse sagas. But when we look at Thor from a classic hero perspective, he is probably the simplest archetype for what makes up a hero, as he is not necessarily judged for what he stands for or believes in, rather what he actually does instead. Thor Complex. Masculinity in a Viking Hero. With Thor, His strength is also a testament to his masculinity, and the very idea of what people believe masculinity should be like in a society. Very seldomly do we ever see a classic hero like Thor, Hercules, or Gilgamesh use their intelligence or wit to defeat their enemies to save the day, and especially not political means like negotiating, as that would just bore them. Most times, it ends with the hero either punching or smashing something to get what they want, as this reflects an early idea of what men were supposed to act like, almost as if they were animalistic in their nature. So, be it known, Thor is not a deep character by any means, and there's no evidence to suggest the Scandinavians thought otherwise with their depiction of the character either. Like the Hulk, Thor's main purpose in the grand scheme of things is to smash and destroy. Hence why the Scandinavians envisioned him wielding a hammer over a sword or an axe. A sword is an elegant weapon, and one that can be wielded with style and finesse, while a hammer is an aggressive weapon. So when we pair the two together, Mjolnir is Thor, as much as Thor is Mjolnir, given that both of their purposes in life is to destroy. Thus, the two exist codependently. Of course, this idea of a brute like hero is not a new concept by any means, as this is arguably one of the most standardized types of heroes that society ever envisioned. This type of hero is a hyper masculine type of hero, and one that has set the bar high for what it meant to be a man in Viking society. Even to this day, though, the idea of Viking manliness is still very much alive and is still being projected onto the character of Thor in the Marvel Universe. As a result of this, the character of Thor has turned into a modern sex symbol for many, and like his Norse mythology counterpart, he has set the bar quite high for what society believes a quote unquote real man should act like. And there's even an argument to suggest that when Thor transformed himself into what the internet dubbed him as Fat Thor in Avengers Endgame, that he still possessed a fragment of hypermasculinity in his demeanor, even if he did look like a sad and overweight alcoholic. If he be worthy. Conclusion. So, when we take everything that was just discussed in this video and compare it to the conventional Scandinavian ideas of what makes a hero and what does not, what is the takeaway here? Is the Marvel Universe's depiction of Thor worthy to be called the God of Thunder, or is he just a cheap ripoff of the original Norse mythology Thor? To play devil's advocate, I would actually argue that despite all their differences in character traits and story, that the Marvel depiction of Thor is worthy to call himself the God of Thunder and wield Mjolnir. This is not the classic God of Thunder, as he's actually the God of Thunder for a new age, because not only does he hold on to enough of the original character's traits to still be called Thor, but also strives to be his own thing as well, and as a result, I do not believe he damages the original Norse saga's legacy. On behalf of the CBU Historical Society, thank you so much for watching. My name is Avery, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to hit the like button, and even consider subscribing to the channel, as your support really means a lot. See you next time.